This is Gwen Talks Radio, where intimate conversations reveal, heal, inspire, and entertain. And now, here's your host, Tess Cacciatore.
Okay, here we go. Welcome to Gwen Talks Radio. This is your host, Tess Cacciatore. And I did my show last Wednesday, and after I got off the show, the world crumbled around for me and many of us, all of us, I'm sure, that heard the news of the student that went in and shot and killed 17 innocent people at the Florida's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Devastation hit us all, but I have to say I feel a shed of light that is coming through, and this has all to do with the youth that are standing up to have their voices heard and knowing that their power of vote is going to change the world that we're living in. Their commitment to go on a bus in busloads going up to Tallahassee to talk to the politicians at the state capitol was awe-inspiring. I watched the videos of the senators and the politicians in the courthouse that had a meeting with the leaders of this change, and I was appalled by their stuttering and stammering and not answering their questions. What does it take for someone who has had the right to be holding office in our country that they don't stand up for the rights of people? I don't understand it. These people need to be voted out. We need to change the system. We need to change the gun laws. I can go on for a long time about this topic, but we have two important guests that are coming up on my show today in a somewhat related law-changing subject. But before I do, I want to give a big shout out to all the students that are standing up to have your voices heard. And Emma Gonzalez, I'm so proud of you and love the fact that you're getting the celebrity in Hollywood support that you deserve to make the March 24th success when you're going to go to Washington. I will be standing with you, but in another part of the country. I'll be down in Atlanta, and I have lots of friends that are going to be coming onto the Capitol grounds with you and standing with you, and I stand with you. And I know you must be feeling all the love that's been shared with you. So at Emma for Change, follow her, support the young people in our town, hold our politicians accountable. We need to change the laws. If anyone's out there listening and they need my help in anything, I'm very passionate about this topic and would love to help. So, speaking of our radio show and guests in the theme of revealing and healing, we have two very important guests on our show today, Rob Decker and Chase Garcia. And I'm not going to do much of an introduction because their story will speak volumes. I just want you to listen with an open heart and open mind, because if you have never been in an addictive lifestyle, or if you haven't lived with someone who is addicted to drugs or alcohol or any other addictions that they may have, you may feel that these stories are not relatable to you, but they are, because it's about humanity. It's about being able to have the courage to stand up and share your story so that we can all heal. So I look forward to bringing Rob Decker on right after this break, and we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm David Longoria with my new song, Playground, featuring Dallas Lovato with me. Time to dance. Playground is available now on all digital music stores and streaming. David Longoria featuring Dallas Lovato. Playground.
Welcome back to Gwen Talks Radio. This is your host, Tess Cacciatore. And as I said in the introduction, we have very special guests today that are actually friends. And the story that's going to be unveiled today in that big conversation that I have all the time, that tagline, reveal to heal. It's really important to me to be able to tell our stories, to unveil the dark shadows, to be able to talk to ourselves and find that level of self-love, to have the courage to share our story, whether it's just in a journaling book or if you actually have the courage to come on a radio show or a talk show or like I said in the introduction, those young people that took the bus yesterday to go to the state capitol and really make a difference. It's really about telling our stories. So I'm going to go without introduction because I've already spoken to him. He's Rob Decker. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tess. And I'm just so happy to be here. And I've been looking forward to this moment for a long time.
I know. Well, we were introduced by our dear friend Kate Patton, and she has been incredible in both of our lives. We can tell, do a big shout out for her because she introduced us several months ago. And so I want to thank you for your patience that it has taken for us to get together. But I think it's all in divine timing because if this didn't happen at this exact time, we might not have had another story that you're going to share, as well as the guest that you helped me find, which is Chase Garcia, which we'll be talking to him in the next interview segment. But let's do a shout out to Kate because, oh my gosh, so you are writing your story to go into her anthology book. And through the process of her and I knowing, she got rid of her magazine, The Missing Piece, and got back to writing. And in a few short weeks, it seems, she's already completed her book. She's awe-smacking amazing because it's taken me 8 years to finish one book, and she's probably doing 20, 40 books in 8 weeks.
She's amazing. Yeah. I'm pretty sure she finished either yesterday or today. And, tonight I'll be submitting my story for one of her books. So, and like you said, perfect timing. As far as Chase is concerned, we were able to talk just recently and redevelop our friendship and catch up. And I'm glad that he's along board with us to be able to share his story as well.
Absolutely. So, I just want to dive in because when you told me your story, this was probably 5 or 6 months ago when we were introduced, my jaw dropped to the ground and I said, I want to find a very special place to have him on the show. So you are highlighted in all of your glory because this is an amazing journey. So just tell our listeners and me again how we came to be here together today.
All right. Well, first, it's going to be all God's glory. I just get to kind of be a vessel that shares my experience. And, and I love what you said earlier about, revealing. I think a lot of times it's hard for people to talk about the things they've been through. And I believe that by being so transparent and so vulnerable, so willing in my story, it gives an opportunity to help other people. And that's why I do this. I want to share God's love with other people. So my story it starts before I was born. My mother, who was virtually outcasted by her family, she had been beaten and raped and black sheeped at a very young age. And then she ended up getting pregnant. And while I was in her womb, there were many naysayers and individuals wanting her to abort me. They wanted her to get rid of me for whatever reason. And my mom refused to do that. And so my back was against the wall pretty early on. Now, as time went on, my mother met I'll call him my father. He's my stepfather, but I'll call him my father because he raised me. I don't know my biological father too much. I met him a couple times, but I don't have a relationship with him, unfortunately. So my father met my mother. They started dating, had my sister. They got married. And early on in their marriage, I remember coming home from school one day and I had a certificate that had my father's last name on it. And that day he informed me that he wasn't my real father, that we were going to have to change my last name. And I remember in that moment, like, wow, this is it was kind of a blow to a 5 or 6 year old. And, that day I walked down the street after they told me and whatever came over me, it was what came over me. And I just had this feeling that everything was going to be okay. And God was my father. And I don't even know where I got that thought. And I believe that the Holy Spirit brought it back to memory as I started to age. But I knew I was going to be okay. God was my father. Everything was going to be all right. And as time went on, in my household, I would see kind of a game of favorites between me and my sister and my mom and my dad. They weren't really compatible on many levels. They had a completely different thought and idea on how to raise kids. And, there was drugs, there was alcohol, There was a lot of domestic issues. And over time, and as I aged, they just got worse and worse. Dad worked long hours. Mom had her thing going, and the drugs were just disintegrating that relationship. So as I got into high school, I started going down a similar path. I started getting involved in the drugs and the alcohol. And it started off with just drinking. It started off as drinking. It was simple. And then eventually introduced to marijuana. And then the marijuana wasn't enough. And it led into acid and ecstasy, mushrooms, and eventually cocaine. And, I would get in a lot of trouble. As a young guy, I spent some time in juvenile hall, got in plenty of fights. Fighting was a big thing for me. I know that I saw a lot of it in my house, and my dad and I, we just bumped heads a lot. And so, I just picked up on a lot of what he did, and I took it out to the streets. With that, I remember, the first time I got locked up, and, the police had called my dad and told him where I was at. And he was like, yeah, I'll get you in the morning. He wasn't really too concerned with picking me up. And I just remember the morning got there and he wasn't there. And at the end of it, I ended up spending a month in juvenile hall for some crazy stuff. I got in trouble for, armed robbery. That's what it was. Armed robbery. I didn't commit anything. I was with a friend. We went into a store. He maced the clerk just because he always gave this clerk a hard time. Clerk said that I took something. At the end of the day, it was armed robbery. So I get nailed with this nasty charge. I tell this story because it leads into a much greater story. As time went on, my parents finally broke up. They had relationships within their relationship. They were married. It was a mess. We got kicked out of our house when I was roughly 17, 18 years old. I had some friends that they helped take care of me. I'm very grateful. I love my buddy and his family, and they took great care of me throughout my 20s. But there was a lot of unresolved issues in my life. And I kept getting involved in these relationships, and I understand that, because of my relationship with my mom, not that she was a bad mom, she was just young and she didn't want to see me go through a lot of stuff. But she didn't know how to conduct any of that. She didn't know how to raise a kid. I started getting into these relationships, and, they were just, they were uneasy. A lot of my insecurities, a lot of my experiences, a lot of my childhood would come out, and then the alcohol and the drugs would kind of compound on all that stuff. And as time went on, I started getting in more trouble, getting into more relationships. There was some really good ones that I would completely destroy because, having peace in a relationship didn't make sense to me. The chaos in a relationship made more sense to me. And I kept getting involved in those kind of relationships. Eventually, I got involved with this young woman, and pretty crummy how I met her. I actually met her because I was selling drugs. I was selling steroids. And I went to go cash a check at a bank, and I happened to be driving the car of the girl I happened to be seeing at the time. Well, I met this other girl at the bank. She was a teller, and we exchanged phone numbers, and I started seeing her while I was seeing this other girl. I was very selfish when it came to dating. And, it was kind of like, I was just really trying to fill a lot of needs, my own needs, without the concern of anybody else. And as time went on, I ended up breaking up with the other girl. But the girl from the bank, we continued to have a relationship. Well, it was a pretty destructive relationship. She came from a pretty rough family background. Dad had left mom high and dry, like basically homeless. So there was a lot of trust issues there. And as we dated, a lot of this stuff came out. We drank. It just became completely destructive. It got to a point where it was just reckless, and it had to be over. So we break up, and the time I spent away from this relationship, I ended up finding the Lord. I ended up going to Bible studies. I had a friend that invited me. I got saved and I started reading my Bible and going to church. Well, in the meantime, the enemy was constructing a whole nother plan. And that plan was, let's bring this young lady back into his life. And so one of my friends had reached out to me, said, hey, you know, such and such is escorting. She's on Craigslist. She's selling her body for money. And I was like, totally, I was blown away. I still cared about her, but now I also had a relationship with God. And I felt like I could come into her life and I could preach to her about God and what she should and should not be doing. I really had no business doing any of these things. I mean, at the time I was still drinking, still using. My relationship with God was very, very new. And I didn't have a license. I was working out all the time. Fitness was like that one thing that I had, my go-to. Fitness was like my first God. That's what fitness was for me. It was something that I'd always ran to through anger and pain and confusion. It was just, that was my greatest relationship was fitness. Drugs and alcohol as well, but fitness was that one healthy and constructive drug, I guess, because fitness could be a drug. And I got back involved with this young lady, and I remember she was out on one of her dates, or she went on a trip. She went on a trip with this gentleman, and while she was on this trip with this gentleman who was paying for her services, she had been texting me and calling me, letting me know that she was sorry for all the stuff that had transpired between us when we broke up the first time. And we were both responsible for a lot of stuff, but she was apologizing for her stuff. And she was sending me pictures of a black eye. She had been raped while she was on this trip. She had been beaten. She'd been belittled, and she'd been totally broken. And so when she came back, the plan was we were going to work some stuff out. Well, she came back Memorial Day weekend from this trip. She comes to pick me up from my buddy's house, and we've been drinking. We've been watching the Lakers game, and we were drinking. And she comes and grabs me, and we stop off at the liquor store to pick up some alcohol. We head back to her place. Well, you know, we start talking about some of the stuff that went on, and, you know, things were heading in a like a sexual direction, and I had to stop. I just couldn't. I mean, there was too much that had previously happened between us, too much that had happened to her on her trip. And we argued a little bit, and I went downstairs to shake it off. While I was downstairs, my eyes are opened up to the sound of the police banging on the door. And they're screaming like, "Oh, Rob Decker, we know you're in there, open up." And she comes down the stairs, and I look at her and ask her, you know, what's going on? And she looked at me, and she told me that she called the cops and told the cops that I had raped her and that I had tried to kill her. And in this moment of betrayal and brokenness and hopelessness, I just looked at her and was just like, you know, I can't do this anymore. It's just not a life for me. I don't want to be here anymore. And I turned around and I ran and jumped through a closed window out of a 3-story loft out there in Santa Clara. And my primary objective was just to kill myself. I'm done. I'm good. And on the way down, my foot clipped an awning. I guess I had spun, changed my fall quite a bit, and I ended up completely shattering my left arm, breaking my right wrist, collapsing my left lung, and I broke my back. I broke my lower back. In that moment, I don't remember so much the fall, but I remember looking up at that broken window and gasping for air and not being able to move and just asking God why. Like, why would you even let me live? And I remember the chaos of the police coming down and the ambulance and the sirens and them taking me to the hospital and took me down to the general hospital. And they spent the next 8 to 10 hours attempting to put me back together. And I woke up the next day and I had an external fixator on my left arm. I had a cast on my right arm. I had a back brace. I had tubes coming out of my neck. I had oxygen machine going. And the detective showed up to the hospital and arrested me for rape and attempted murder, and threw a $1 million bond on me. And I remember just being there and a couple of days was it. I just remember this cop just grilling me. He was giving me a hard time. I think they wanted me to admit something. Maybe he was just upset that he had to basically babysit this guy that couldn't leave. They put this 24-hour surveillance on me, and she showed up. And she had disguised herself, put some sunglasses on, changed her hairstyle, brought her sister. And, while the cop was giving me a hard time, he looks up, he sees who it is. He automatically knows who it is. And he asked me about it. And, I agree. And that's who that is. And he asked her to leave. And, his statement to me was, for someone who had just went through all that doesn't make sense right there. And that's the last I ever saw her. Within the next couple of days, I'd lay in bed and I'd be talking to God. And I asked the Lord, I was like, Lord, what's going on? What are we going to do? Like, what's going to come of all this stuff? And my words, to be exact, I don't know, but it was along those lines. And I just remember in the midst of all this paralyzing pain and being shackled to a bed and the lights and the sounds of all the movement around me, I remember this peaceful feeling, this just calming feeling coming through me all the way through my body. And for a moment, I was pain-free. And I hear this small, still voice in my head, very clear, very peaceful. And I hear the voice and it says, the charges will be dropped, your bills will be paid, and you will walk again. And I doze off into this vision or this dream of me playing soccer. And I wake up and all the pain's there. The cop is still there. The chaos is still going on around me. But within a couple of days, the detective showed up and they said, Mr. Decker, you're no longer under arrest. You're free and we only wish you the best. And that little small still voice was correct. The charges were dropped. Now, later on another day, when I was released a couple months later from the hospital, they did try to show up to the house and they tried to get me to admit that I did these things. Little did they know that she was involved with what she was involved with. When I explained to the cops, what had happened, they had no idea she was escorting. The cops' reasoning for them not knowing was she must have been very embarrassed. Well, this makes a very big impact on what's going on and what you're trying to charge me with. Well, the other detective was giving me a hard time too, was like, hey, you didn't try to commit suicide. What you did was you tried to run away from the police. That's what you tried to do. So here they're still trying to attack me, but I knew what did and didn't happen and what transpired. So eventually what would happen is, I would start walking again after a couple surgeries. I was able to start walking. It started with, dragging my foot on the ground. That's how it started. But it took a second surgery for that to happen. Now, when that second surgery took place and I was able to drag my foot, I knew, because that voice was right the first time, that I would walk again. So my only goal was to become extremely athletic, to get into great health, to get back to a place where I could fully function, which has happened. It took a long time to get there, but it's happened. But over time, the other promise came to light, where you're not going to have to pay any bills, or your bills are covered. About $2 million later, from my understanding, the state of California, Medi-Cal, Medicaid, whatever it was at the time that I was under, completely supported and took care of those bills. So all these things started to come to pass. In the meantime, I was getting in my word. I was praying. I was still trying to walk the straight and narrow. I struggled with alcohol. I was still on some pain medications for all the pain. And I kept praying, and I was like, Lord, I need you to remove the pain pills from my life. I need you to remove the alcohol from my life. The pain pills came in effect when I was training. I was trying to build my body back up. So the pain pills were needed between the two types of pain of the broken back and the training. But over time, all those pills started to fall off. And before you know it, I wasn't taking anything. A few years into it, I was still struggling with alcohol a little bit. That was like my last thing. I think it was my longest lasting addiction, I guess you call it. And I just remember, something happened where I sat before God and I said, God, if you get me out of this situation that I'm in, because I got myself in a little bit of trouble after everything he had already kind of carried me through. I said, I will quit drinking alcohol. That's my promise to you. I will. And at the time, my wife to be, we were boyfriend and girlfriend. We were living in Northern California, and she had just graduated college. And I took it before God and I said, hey, if you help me out, you don't have to help me out because I deserve whatever trouble that I brought on myself. I will move to Southern California, quit the good paying job that I have right now to do so. I will marry Alyssa. Alyssa's my wife. I will marry Alyssa, right? And I'll quit drinking. And, he was so merciful to me. I haven't drank since. He finds ways to remove these things from your life. And I feel that because of the promise that I made to him and how serious I took it, I just haven't been able to turn back to the alcohol. So that's been a huge blessing. But when it's all said and done, I'm here today. I'm a personal fitness trainer. I'm on this path of trying to inspire, encourage people through God's grace and mercy that he had on my life through podcasts and speaking at churches and whatever. I know that my buddy Chase, who's with us today, he runs Celebrate Recovery at the Dream Center in LA. And I know that he's going to have me come over and speak with him, and we're going to share our stories together. And so, I'm watching all these things unfold. And ultimately, my goal in all of this is really to give hope to people, because I know this. I spent so many years without hope. I spent so many years without feeling loved. And now that I know what love is, like I look at God and I'm like, thank you for loving me. Thank you for carrying me through all this stuff. Thank you for giving me the eyes to see all the people along the way that did love me and that they did try to help me. It's crazy. When you're in those moments, when you're in your head and all this stuff is going on and you're confused, you don't see how other people are loving you. And, he gave me eyes to start seeing those kind of things. And because of the overwhelming love that he's poured into my life, I just want to share it with others. And so that's why I'm here today.
Yay. Oh my gosh. I'm just blown away. There's so many layers upon layers upon layers. And
yes,
thank you for sharing that. Usually, I have this back and forth conversation and questions arise and a conversation is ensuing, but you just gave such a beautiful overview. There's no way that I could ever even come up with the pattern of conversation, because you really needed to share that story from the beginning, from you being in the womb with your mother. I strongly believe that babies are impacted and affected by what's happening on the outside, and that set the pattern. And then just going into the whole story of the addiction and the bravery to be able to say, I was addicted, and that gal, wherever she went, God bless her, because we don't know what happened in her life, that she was probably raped as a young girl. And that sets the precedent for the self-worth and the lack of self-love and the lack of self-confidence to make the right decisions. This to me is like the A to Z in the storytelling of Revealing to Heal. And by the way, I might add, because you didn't put this in the thing, you have a little 1-year-old son that's taking a nap right now while we're doing the show.
Yes.
So blessings to you and your success of your healing, and that you've gotten to this place and that you're sharing your love and your story with other people. Because I know there's people out there that are listening to this, and it's such an inspirational story. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tess. It's sometimes it's challenging because, you're working within time restraints. It's like, okay, well, how much of this story can I put out there? Like, you're throwing out a buffet of information, right? And so it's like, what can I throw out there that's really going to impact individuals and get them to relate? Because at the end of the day, it's like, it has to be relatable. And I want, people to look at the story as a whole, like, man, I can grab on this, maybe not that, but, there's this and this. And it's a deep story. It's a really deep story. And there's so much more to it. But, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on it. And I just pray that it helps somebody.
Well, that's what I want to do. I feel like one of the multiple things I'm doing to be in service is to offer a platform for people to share their stories so that we can all grab onto the little pieces that are relevant to us and say, wow, if they went through that, then I can get through it too. And if they went through the healing part, then I can do that too. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to bring back your buddy. And I just met him very quickly on the pre-show, so I can't wait to hear his story and how you all work together. And I'm just so blessed and honored to have you on the show. And we're going to be right back with Chase Garcia to hear his story too. We'll be right back.
The Little Dog That Could is the fantastically true story of a man and a little dog that came into his life as his mentor to help him understand the world beyond his human senses and to experience life, love, and healing beyond his human understanding. Best-selling author Filippo Voltaggio, who currently hosts the highly regarded Life Changes show, is an internationally known singer, speaker, and life coach. Filippo offers up his own story, how one little surprise package in fur and 4 legs transformed his life unexpectedly forever and furthered his path of self-discovery. In The Little Dog That Could, Filippo brings to life the meaning of the adage, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Through the reading of this book, you will experience the journey of real miracles that transcend time, space, and logic while gaining practical tools that will help you navigate your way. The Little Dog That Could is available through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. For more information, visit thelittledogthatcould.com. That's thelittledogthatcould.com.
Okay, welcome back to Gwen Talks Radio. This is your host, Tess Cacciatore, and we have still with us, thank God, Rob Decker. So we are going to bring on one of his friends who I just met this morning. The story that these two young men have is so inspiring, and I know that it's going to change the lives of not one, but many people by listening here. So Chase Garcia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tessa. Good morning. I'm happy to be here, and I just appreciate the opportunity to be able to share my story in hopes that somebody out there listening is maybe going through a similar situation. And
I get a little Southern accent. Are you from the South somewhere?
I'm actually born and raised in Huntington Beach, California. I have no idea where the Southern drawl comes from.
That is so funny. I had a friend in Iowa, and he always sounds like he's Matthew McConaughey from Alabama, and I'm like, where did you get this accent from? You're from Iowa, for gosh sakes. But it's adorable, and so are you. And thank you for coming on to share your story. I know that you and Rob knew each other from your work together or something. How did you all meet?
Yeah. So I met Rob Decker while I was working at a student loan business. It was called the United Advisors Group, and he was a coworker of mine. And at the time, I was still struggling with meth and alcohol addiction. I remember drinking in the parking lot during my lunch break just to help with my confidence levels because it was phone sales. And, I would drink and whatever. And Rob and I had some pretty deep conversations at the time. He was completely sober, walking with God. I was walking with God. However, I was backslidden, and we had some good talks though. And, it's just nice to be able to reconnect with him. It's been a few years, but we've reconnected. And, now that I'm sober, he's sober, we can, both share our stories, but that's kind of how we met. And, yeah.
So tell me, so alcohol and meth, those are two dangerous combinations. I'm so fortunate that you're here to have a conversation. I've seen from the outside looking in people that have been addicted to cocaine and meth and speed and things like that. And it's so dangerous for your health. So I'm so glad you're here to share the story. How did you come to a place where you became addicted to these drugs?
Well, Tessa, it was a progressive bondage. I guess you could put it. I started out just smoking weed when I was 14. When I started smoking weed, the thing that kind of took me for the wrong direction was, I realized that I never had to be bored again. Every time I felt bored, I knew that I could just smoke weed or drink a beer, and that would take all my boredom away. So my life quickly went from playing basketball and sports and being happy to all of a sudden trying not to ever be bored and to always have a substance in my hand in order to it was all about having fun at that point. And like I said, the weed progressively went to alcohol. The alcohol progressively went to all the different drugs in high school that you could try. But it wasn't until I was 18 that I tried meth for the first time. And I tell you what, Tessa, when I tried meth, the best way that I could explain the way I felt in that moment, quote unquote, when my friends asked me how I felt after I took my first hit of it, I told them I felt perfect. I had never felt a better high than this drug called methamphetamine. And so I was 18 years old when I tried that for the first time, and that began what was a 10-year back on top of already being an alcoholic and a pothead, smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. I was just completely consumed from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. If I went to bed that night, it was just all about getting high. So that's kind of how I got onto meth. Pretty much my mom and I got evicted from our apartment. I moved in with a good friend of mine from my middle school. I hadn't seen him in a few years. I was working at Petco. He stopped in to buy some dog food. And I was like, hey, what's going on, Steven? And he offered a place for me to stay because, like I said, we got evicted, right? And so I stayed with my best friend from middle school, and he had lost a lot of weight. I didn't really understand, how he had lost a lot of weight, but it turns out he was using meth. And he ended up offering to me, tried it, and it's just been a up and down road, mainly down from that point forward.
Did your mom, now with the eviction stuff, was that due to something that happened with your mom? Was she using as well?
Well, you know what? I was raised by a single mother. My father, he's addicted to meth. And I didn't really know him. So I was raised by my mom, and honestly, I take full responsibility for my addictions. It was nothing that stemmed from, my mother or bad parenting. It's just a man who experienced a high and got hooked and quickly made that the first priority in my life. I have nobody to blame but myself and my bad decisions as far as that.
Well, I'm not trying to pin any responsibility on your mom or anything. And it's so courageous for you to say, it's so easy for us to blame our parents and blame our relatives and things like that. It's so courageous of you to say, I take full responsibility. However, there's also a genetic disposition and there's also behavioral things that we learn. So I'm just, saluting to the single parents that are out there, because I do know a lot of single fathers as well, but the single parents that have to raise their kids and the stresses that entails, sometimes people fall prey into, using substances, sometimes even when they're pregnant. So there's a chemical dependency that kind of gets built into the genetic code. So I'm stating that to say there's various ways, and it's so great of you to say I'm taking full responsibility. However, if you're a parent out there and you have some kind of a problem and it could impact your children, I just encourage you to try to get help, for gosh sakes, because it's a horrible thing to be able to have to be on your own, raising your children and having those pressures, but they do trickle down. Cycles of abuse trickle down. Addiction trickles down. So thank you for being courageous on that. So keep going. I just wanted to insert that.
Yeah, it's kind of a trip that you say that because I wasn't raised around my father, but by the time I was 21 years old, I was just like my father. My My father is he used to be an alcoholic. He's currently just addicted to meth now. But it's crazy because I was an alcoholic and I was addicted to meth as well. And I wasn't even raised around him.
Exactly.
And there's yeah. So
I think there's genetic dispositions in certain ways, so don't be so hard on yourself. We get to, this is the space where we get to forgive and move forward and heal and through this whole revealing process. So I salute the single parents in the world, the mothers that have to raise their children on their own with the fathers missing, which is both of your instances. However, I do know several fathers that are single parents as well. So if you're out there and you have an addiction to something and you know that you are impacting your children in a way that's going to create that other cycle to happen, because then it's going to happen to their children and their children. Right now, what I want to do is raise the awareness and having the conversation that the cycles of abuse that we've all gone through happens because there is a cycle there. So how do we raise awareness, shine a spotlight on it, and be able to really be brave enough to break that cycle, do whatever we can. Now, here I have two young men that have gone through severe addictions and severe stories, but they've been conscious, aware, and have chosen to have God in their life and to be in ministry and all that. You, Chase, work at the Dream Center, which is one of our charity spotlights. We're going to come back to Rob in a second and talk about his charity spotlight because he has a beautiful story attached to that one. But the Dream Center has some special meaning to me, and I'm hoping that my dear friend Samantha is listening to the show, because you might be smiling ear to ear right now, because you are inspiring other people, you, Chase, to, especially my friend Samantha, to come to LA, and I want you two to meet because it's her dream to work at the Dream Center. So tell me about how you found the Dream Center, what you all do, which I know a little bit about it, but in case the listeners don't know, this is one of our charity spotlights. So tell us about your work there and what the Dream Center does.
Okay, well, to answer your first question, how I found the Dream Center, I'm 31 right now, but when I was 22, I had a radical reborn experience where my current fiance now, she was my girlfriend back then. She had left me because of my drug and alcohol addictions, and she told me to choose, either drugs or me, right? And for a while there, I was prideful, and I decided to choose alcohol and drugs over her. And but after a couple of months, I decided that, hey, I actually really love this woman and I would like to have her back in my life. So I'm going to go ahead and try to quit. Well, it wasn't until I tried to quit that I realized how severe of a problem I really had, because I really tried to quit. I would wake up every morning and I'd say, you know what, I'm not going to drink today. I'm not going to use any drugs today. But by the end of the day, I was always using. And that was when I realized that I had a serious problem. And I remember being in my room and I was drunk by myself crying. And I cried out to God. I said, God, please send me a substitution for these drugs, because I just wanted to get my girl back and I wanted to get off the drugs. But shortly after that prayer, I had a radical reborn experience, but I received the Holy Spirit. I was enlightened, to the truth that in order for my sins to be forgiven, Jesus Christ, death on the cross, his sacrifice was an eternal sacrifice that forgave me, and that it was my duty to then, serve him as my Lord. Well, I wish I could say that right after that, I was able to quit, drugs and alcohol, cold turkey. I was able to quit alcohol, but I was still smoking weed every single day. I had one hand behind my back and one hand outreach to God, but I was never able to fully get sober. I quit drinking for 2 years, and then I was still smoking weed every day. But then I slowly fell back into drinking, and I fell back into meth. And by the time I was 28 years old, I had lost my job. This is around the time that I met Rob. I lost my girlfriend again. I was on the verge of being homeless, and it was either get some help or be homeless on the streets. And the scary thing about it is that I was considering being homeless. I loved the high of methamphetamine so much that I was considering, well, you know what? I can be homeless, but at least I'll still be high, and that was one of the moments where I realized, man, I have a serious problem here. Long story short, my father was in jail. and the courts were trying to find him a good rehabilitation program. They sent my grandfather a list of secular and faith-based rehabs. And my grandpa's a Christian, so he chose the faith-based rehabs, and he closed his eyes and he put his finger on a random rehab on the list. Well, his finger landed on the Dream Center of Los Angeles. And he was telling my father about this place. You know, the Dream Center was intended for my father. Well, I picked up my father from jail. You know, he would call me once in a while when he needed a ride or something. And I picked him up, and he said that Grandpa wanted him to go to this place called the Dream Center. So we started researching it, and I was just happy that he was considering getting help. And as we were researching the Dream Center, we went to YouTube, and one of the first videos that popped up was called Chase's Story, and my name is Chase, right? It's kind of a rare name too, you know. And I was like, oh wow, like okay, I
call those winky dinks from God.
yeah. It was a trip, you know. And then there was another video about like the Dream Center having a dance studio, and believe it or not, Tessa, I used to pop lock, and like dancing was a big part of my, like it was a passion of mine. And then there was another video talking about how the Dream Center even had like a Bible school, and it was three things that hit home with me. And I felt the Holy Spirit say, Chase, not only is this place for your father, but this place is for you as well. And you know, my father and I agreed to fill out the application. We were supposed to come together. I ended up being the only one that came. He never came, but I came here in April of 2015, and I've been here ever since. The Dream Center, it's been a true blessing because it was free. It's this year-long residential inpatient program, and you know, all the other rehabs were trying to charge like $10,000, $40,000 a month, and it was ridiculous. I didn't have that money, and so anyways. Dream Center was free. I've been here for almost 3 years. I'm 2 months shy of being 3 years sober.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it's a miracle because before coming to the Dream Center, the longest stint that I had made it sober was 4 days. I'm telling you, I was that hooked, and I never went to jail or anything like that. I was blessed, you know, that I didn't ever have to go to jail for a long, extended period of time. But I'm talking 4 days sober, and that was the day after I got baptized. I was on this emotional high, but that's how hooked I was. Was it in 14 years? Every single other day, it was a full-time job. It was I was getting high every single day. But for me to
are you still a resident there, or do you work there, or? Yeah,
so I finished the first year program, and then they have a second year program called Connections, which is it's kind of geared to get the graduates of the first year discipleship back on their feet as far as like finding a job, you know, and starting to save money. In the process of me being in Connections, the Dream Center actually hired me on as staff. Right now, I currently direct one of their transitional living program, and they also made me the ministry leader of a Celebrate Recovery, which is kind of like a faith-based 12-step program, if you will.
I love that. Congratulations. That is so amazing. We're going to have to, we're coming to the close of the show, but I'm so applauding you right now. And thank you so much for all that you're doing to help other people find that light. So I just want to thank you so much for having the courage and the fact that you've come out of that arc. You had the answers to your prayer like Rob did, which is obviously the name of the show, this episode. And thanks for all the work that you're doing to help other people, you know, stay clean and on that path and finding their light. Rob, are you there? I want you to come on because you two are buddies and just.
I'm right here.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much for both of you to come on to the show together. And the fact that the camaraderie between the two of you is so inspiring. We have a beautiful charity to spotlight, the Seeking Light candles.etsy.com. So please tell that story. We have a couple minutes left for the show, but please tell that story about the Seeking Light candles. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, actually, it still kind of hits home when I tell it. So I have good friend. His name was Mark. And, I met Mark while I was working at Orange Theory Fitness as a manager, and we hit it off. And he was about to get married to his wife. And so outside of Orange Theory, him and I would go to the gym together because he wanted to get in stellar shape for his wedding. Like naturally, I did the same thing. Mark and I were very good friends, hit it off, kept in contact. And, last year, unfortunately, we lost Mark. We lost Mark to depression, anxiety, drug abuse. He used to kind of battle the demons that were going on with him. It was completely heartbreaking. It took me out for like a week, cried a lot about that situation. And, I look at Chase and myself and I'm like, man, we made it out. It's very, very grateful for that. And Mark, he left behind a stepdaughter, which he treated like his daughter. He left behind a newborn who's my son's age. So Adeline is, I think, a couple weeks younger than my son Caleb, and Caleb's 13 months. I saw a lot of Mark, myself and Mark, and I just, we had some pretty good conversations. But, his wife, Lila has created her own small company, and it's called Seeking Light Candles. And they're organic candles. You can go and you can order on her site. And what she does is she takes 5% of those profits and she donates to the bipolar society, because Mark was considered bipolar. He was on a lot of medication for it. And, the crazy thing is that apparently Mark had tried like a new painkiller for his back. He was in a lot of back pain, and that one small dose of whatever he took him out permanently. And we lost him last year. So, my heart goes out to Lila and her family and the two daughters. But, you can find Lila on Instagram at Seeking Light 16. You can order her products through that, and then she'll donate to the bipolar International. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. Or you can find her on Seeking Light Candles at .etsy.com. So.
Wow. I send, it's interesting to say thoughts and prayers because I'll be talking about that after the break leading into our musical cast, but I do send many, many prayers to not only Lila and her family, but to you, Rob, and your new family and your beautiful son who's going to be waking up from a nap soon, I'm sure, and to Chase.
Oh, he's awake.
Oh, is he the one making the noises in the background?
Right.
Oh,
he wants to let Daddy know that he's awake and ready to go.
Oh, well, you go have a beautiful day with your son, and thank you so much again. Make sure that you check out seekinglightcandles.etsy.com and thedreamcenter.org. And Chase works in the Los Angeles Center, but I do know there's other branches in other states. So if you know of a dream center around your neck of the woods, then I would highly recommend going in there and doing some volunteer work. Always knowing that volunteering and giving back is a way that we get to be able to see that our lives are blessed and that we have answers to our prayers every day, that we are all protected and all of that good stuff. So thank you again, Rob and Chase, for the courage and the fortitude to be these strong pillars of men in our communities, to be able to spread your story and spread your faith. And it's very infectious, and sending you many blessings. So when we be back, we're going to go into the story of the song spotlight of the week. And thank you again, boys.
Thank you.
We'll be right back.
Thank you,
Tessa. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Fran Drescher, and I'm on Gwen Talk Radio. And I hope you go to cancerschmanza.org and learn how you can reduce your risk of cancer and a lot of other illnesses for you and your family. Go now and save your lives.
So it's interesting how sometimes social media and cliches bring awareness to me. Last Wednesday on Valentine's Day, I posted on Facebook, sending prayers to the families in Florida. This, again, is devastating news. I got a variety of responses, including ones like, Screw prayers. Please, please stop this. And I thought, wow, I wish I had the power to stop this, and I'm going to do everything I can in my power as a single person in this country to do whatever I can. And there were some nice comments. And then there was one that said, agreed. So let's get angry and stop saying what should be an epitaph by now. Thoughts and prayers, in quotes. Then another person posted this graphic of something a little lewd and said, thoughts and prayers in sign language. And then another person said, what? Just prayers? Obviously no thought. So it got me thinking about thoughts and prayers and how cliche it is, but sometimes we're at a loss of words, which is sometimes we just end up falling back into those cliches. So I've been very vocal in my social media feeds this week because of that. And interesting enough, when looking to do my music spotlight, just another miracle kind of popped up because I was asking my radio partner and dear friend Filippo, hey, any music that could go in this theme of this week? And he said, well, I had this guy on my show yesterday, and his name is Ted Wulfers. You can find him on Ted Wulfers Music on YouTube. And guess what? The name of his song is Thoughts and Prayers. We're going to put that on for you right now, then go right into the Mind Over Matter Minute. And we'll close out by saying thank you so much to Chase Garcia and Rob Decker for coming on today. And remember, the world is much better with you in it. And until next time, be blessed.
Thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. In the churches and schools, there's nobody there. They're either all dead or running home scared that the only thing coming is thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers, what can they mean? Are they in the right language? Are they from the right scene? Do they work underwater? Do they fade like your jeans? Whatever they are, it's a horrible dream. Thoughts and prayers, where do they go? I bet you your life that nobody knows. Those holding the cards ain't gonna fold. Let you in and it's all just a show. Ironically, the majority believe in the priority to a man the authority. Stop the madness after all. How many more need to fall? Tales of money on that tall. For the thoughts and the prayer that disappear in the air, since nobody seems to care. Thoughts and prayers, thoughts and prayers. Keep on killing till there's nobody there. Do something about it if you dare. Keep on sending those thoughts and prayers. Keep on sending those thoughts and prayers. Keep on sending those thoughts and prayers.
And now, a Mind Over Matter Minute. Thank you for listening. Visit us at gwen.live and join our Gwen community. Share what's on your mind.